My mom became a single mother after my dad passed away. She looked to religion for direction in her grief. Unfortunately, she was swooped up by a religious group we'll simply call a cult for privacy's sake. They tried to portray themselves as holier-than-thou people, but were really not. It took my mom some time to shake these people, so I have a few childhood stories. And what brainwashing, self-esteem crushing, narcissistic cult would be complete without indoctrinating children? That's where Petty Hellen comes in. Petty Hellen isn't her real name, of course, but I have a few stories of her being petty towards children, so it fits. I also have a few stories of her being outright evil, but let's see how this video goes. She tried to give off a grandmotherly vibe, but she had serious favoritism issues. She didn't like girls unless she could steamroll them and they took it quietly, or the girls fit into cookie-cutter molds of what she thought a girl should be like. She didn't like me. Her usual controlling tactics didn't work too well on me because, well, I was a bit thick and couldn't understand things like sarcasm or pure evil. Or I simply suppressed it all. While I stayed at her house, when I was about 5 years old, I chewed my fingernails in anxiety, and it was so bad most of my thumbnail was gone. I don't know what upset me that badly, but I started to notice things weren't right as I grew older. And I wasn't the only girl to get sorry treatment, so it wasn't just me. It was mostly me, but I wasn't alone. Petty Hellen would occasionally get us all rock candy, and I preferred blue raspberry, cherry, and apple, blue being my absolute favorite. But Helen would only ever get me girly colors. And I despised the rock candy's artificial flavor of watermelon and strawberry. Just, ew. Any begging for blue was ignored. So one time, I grabbed a blue before the boys, because, I was usually the last in line, and it was never stated I couldn't have blue. Apparently, it was an unstated fact, and I got in trouble. Luckily, the boys were also tired of boy colors, and I could trade my stash of uneaten watermelon. No one really liked the strawberry. Speaking of candy, Petty Hellen also kept jars of candy for each boy in her desk. She'd grab some when she was out shopping and drop them into the jars so the boys could get some whenever they wanted. Discovering the jars, I asked her why I didn't have a jar. She said it was because I didn't ask. I didn't know that was an option. She added my jar to save face, but it was a clear example of how little I mattered to her. Another thing that caught my attention was that I didn't notice my picture on the fridge. Everyone she babysat had multiples. One had over 3, but I was only in a group shot. When my mom pointed it out, after I told her, another picture was added to the fridge to save face once again. And it wasn't like I was there once a month. I was there almost as much as anybody else. And one of the reasons why was because we'd get to go to a local watering hole and sometimes field trips with other kids. I spent most of my time looking for lost change because it was the only way for me to make money. I had finally gotten enough for a strawberry shortcake ice cream, which actually tasted pretty good for strawberry. And I was so excited. Petty Hellen stopped me to ask where I was going. When I told her, she told me I wasn't going to get anything unless I got the boys something too. Which of course I couldn't afford. But I had my heart set on buying something, so I got the only thing everyone could have, gum, for 25 cents. That was a big chunk of my earnings, and I couldn't get anything after that. The boys were disappointed they didn't get anything better, but they didn't turn away the gum. Now, when one of Helen's favorites came to the swimming hole with money, she didn't have to get something for everyone. I asked Petty Hellen why, and she sputtered without giving me much of an answer. I think that not only was the girl a favorite, but her mom was supposed to be crazy, and would have had choice words with Petty Hellen about making her daughter spend her lunch money on other children. Now that I think about it, the parents that didn't take Helen's nonsense were painted to be evil and crazy. On the subject of parents, there were usually 2 types of moms. ones that stood up for themselves and their children, and submissive wives. There was really only one type of dad. The kind that would rather dump their child at Petty Hellen's than be a parent. Which brings us to Petty Hellen's pawn in my childhood bully, Paul. Paul was with Petty Hellen the most for years. His mom and dad had separated when he was young. I don't know how much his dad dumped him off in Petty Hellen's care, but I do know it was enough for him to become her pawn and absolute favorite. An untouchable favorite. In the child hierarchy, he sat at the top while boys fought to keep in Petty Hellen's good graces. For example, 2 boys, close enough to be twins and inseparable, were torn apart due to Hellen's favoring one over the other. They would get into such strong arguments, they would be screaming at each other. It was like they hated each other. It was as if she reveled in the fact children fought to be in her favor. Except me, the bottom rung, who didn't understand there was a fight to begin with. And since I was the bottom rung, Paul was able to vent his frustrations onto me with little repercussion. He belittled me, called me names, stole from me, lied, and made me feel so stupid for not coming up with comebacks fast enough. I mean, I wasn't that bitter yet. Come on. There was physical abuse, but the emotional and mental abuse stuck with me the most. Anytime there were bruises or any evidence of my mistreatment, my mom would demand something be done. She didn't know most of what went on because I didn't realize it was wrong until later. Nonetheless, Hellen protected Paul from punishments left and right. Anytime I came to her due to Paul's bullying, she would sneer at me. "He was just playing. You're too sensitive. It was a joke. You're lying. Or if he's that bad, why do you play with him?" Thing was, he wasn't a jerk 24/7. He would have periods where we could play and be nice. But, didn't last long. Now, while she ignored Paul's antics, she watched me like a hawk and pounced the second I ever messed up. One time I was told to brush my teeth, but, I didn't want to, but said I did so I could go play. Paul was up to his tricks again, but this time Petty Hellen started yelling at me that I was a liar, wasn't I? I was lying about Paul like I lied about brushing my teeth. My toothbrush wasn't even wet, she accused. Petty Hellen finally found a foothold to manipulate me like everybody else with blackmail. She said I either stop lying about Paul, or she would tell my mama I lied about brushing my teeth, and I would get a spanking from my mama. I was honestly more upset about doing something wrong rather than the fact it was being lorded over me. I was generally a good kid. I wasn't perfect, of course, but still. When my mom came to pick us up later that day, I stood up straight, and I told her about lying, and that I was sorry and I would accept any punishment she gave me. My mom wasn't upset about something so minor. She gave me a stern talking to, sure, but she didn't spank me. Instead, she was proud I told her the truth on my own. I felt relief and a strange feeling on the back of my neck. Looking back now, I know that Hellen was no doubt glaring at me for destroying her trap card in one day. She didn't expect me to tell on myself. As for Paul couldn't go on bullying forever, even with Petty Hellen protecting him so much. He bullied another kid and hurt him right in front of the kid's mother. She was outraged, and she wouldn't let this be rug swept when she saw it herself. How could this have happened in Petty Hellen's care? People were torn between outrage and supporting Hellen's claims it wasn't a big deal, which only fueled the flames because it was serious. It almost broke the cult apart. Finally, there was a compromise that Paul would be banned from being around the other children. I think his mom watched him more after that. I heard being away from Petty Hellen helped with his issues, and Paul's doing much better now. I hope so. Wish you the best, Paul. But, even with Paul gone, I hated going to her house, and I couldn't figure out why, until I thought of all the ways she treated me less. Then it clicked. After that realization, I stayed away and kept my distance, which was fine for her. When I wasn't there, she'd take the boys to field trips to restaurants, buffets, and places like Charlie Cheese. My brother got to go, but my mom wasn't told about it until after, and the closest place was like an hour away. If she had known about it, she would have made the woman take me. But it was clear that she didn't want me around, since I still went there occasionally. But they never went out when I was there, and my mom was never told they were going out, or else I would be there. It's amazing to me that she doesn't understand why I don't like her. Or, well, she has a theory. She's always hated me from the moment she met me. And then she goes on to tell our first meeting from her perspective. Why, welcome to our community. You can call me Grandmother Hellen. I love my Granny Marshmallow. It's ridiculous to me because the words are right. That's exactly what an awkward 2-year-old me would say, but the context is all wrong. The real thing would have gone something like this. A wee 2-year-old is surrounded by people she doesn't know, and in a place she's never been. On top of the fact her father had died not too long ago. Suddenly, one of the strangers coos at the child. Oh, how cute you are! Hello, Cade. I'm gonna be your Grandmother Helen. We're gonna have so much fun at my house. What is she talking about? Little 2-year-old me would have only understood the word grandmother. And the only one called grandmother in my life was my Granny Marshmallow. Someone who loved my bro and I unconditionally, by the way. Gender didn't matter. So, naturally, I thought she was talking about my granny, and I replied in kind. I love my Granny Marshmallow. It explains why I was garbage to her from then on. I mean, if she wanted to be a grandmotherly figure to me, I would have accepted her love and kindness. But I don't think she's capable of that without having strings attached. Oh well, guess she threw her chances away. I'm doing a lot better these days since cutting out these toxic people from my life. I might have more stories, but the petty things are easier to talk about than the more evil things she's done, which is a lot, and she's not even the worst person I know. But I think I want to do something nicer next video. By the way, I have a Redbubble and Patreon now. Very excited. I want to make mini stickers. If you're interested in supporting my work, take a gander in the description box below. Thanks for watching. This was very long.